Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still aspiring to be viral. We're still well caffeinated, even though I can't talk. And we're now proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and its new practice punter, Marcus Freeman. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend, wondering if I have any eligibility left to punt. He's Tyler James in LaPorte and probably invested in too many knee surgeries to think about punting. Together, we're the full-time content creators and part-time troublemakers at our new home, blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, Notre Dame has a new ranking, number 6 in the AP poll as they begin the season at number 10 Miami. They'll also begin the season with some really good depth, but it was tested by some season-ending injuries. We'll have the latest in the quarterback shuffle, recruiting, and your questions on I couldn't say viral with the new sponsor, but we are still aspiring to be.
As
that's
Eric
your name right on the screen.
At
least I didn't watch
mentioned
that.
As Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. At Academy Sports and Outdoors, they carry all the gear you need from the top brands, all at prices you'll love. I can't wait to get my hands on some of their gear here soon. Shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. So welcome in to all of our live viewers. We appreciate you guys being here. If you're watching on replay, we do love you too. We love you even more if you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We're on the path to 5,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there by subscribing, commenting, and sharing our videos with your fellow Notre Dame fans. If you haven't joined us yet over at blueandgold.com, new subscribers can sign up for an annual subscription with a $1 trial for the first week. That will get you access to everything we write, our growing community on the Loose Emoji board, and our talented teammates who keep churning out content. Blue and Gold continues to be among the top sites across the On3 network in terms of new subscribers since we made the move on July 1st. And won't speak for Eric here, but I know I'm incredibly grateful. I believe he feels the same way for all the support that we've received.
And our last Football Never Sleeps is one of the most viewed that we've ever had. So really appreciate that.
All right, let's get into our opening drive, Eric, and that is the unfortunate news for Notre Dame losing a pair of depth pieces on offense. On Saturday, Notre Dame announced injuries to running back Kedron Young and tight end Kevin Bauman. Young will miss the season with an ACL tear in his right knee. Bowman will miss the season and has subsequently announced his football retirement following an articular cartilage injury in his left knee. Let's take these one at a time. How big of a loss is Young to Notre Dame's backfield, Eric?
You know, Tyler, he was a guy that I really was excited about, but I think when you look at it, barring injury, it's hard to make a case that this is going to affect Notre Dame's bottom line in 2025. But I was really excited about how they might use him as a niche or situational back, maybe in short yardage and goal line situations. And then, you know, this experience would certainly set him up for a larger role in 2026 when we presume that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price won't be on the roster anymore. So very unfortunate for the young man. But again, I think Notre Dame with 5 running backs has the numbers and has the quality to still have a very, very good running game.
Yeah, he's an intriguing piece, but not a critical one would be how I described Kedron Young. There's the capable backups with Aeneas Williams and Jabron Payne behind Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. I even think Nolan James Jr. is talented too. I do think it's worth noting that at Sunday's practice, if I have my days right, they've sort of blurred together during camp season. That Aeneas Williams was limited a little bit in practice. He had an elbow sleeve on. It looked like he wasn't bending his elbow as much and was taking some limited reps. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But he was out there dressed and still doing things. So that would seem to indicate it's not a huge concern, but maybe something to monitor moving forward. What Eric, would you say Kedron Young is an interesting player in my opinion, because he seems like towards the top of the list of guys that people are obsessed with his potential, even though maybe that wasn't necessarily going to
Juwan Sider being one of them, the running backs coach.
Yeah, impact Notre Dame this season. What do you think were reasonable expectations for him for this year?
I thought he would see the field. I mean, I don't know how many high leverage situations they would be, but I think he wouldn't just be a mop-up guy. And, you know, what Juwan Sider had said to him is, I want you to prepare like you're the starter, because he does feel like the young man is going to have a very bright future at Notre Dame. Would he have been the short yardage back or the goal line back? It's hard to say because Jeremiah Love is so good at that. I mean, look at the 2-yard run against Penn State. Who else does that? But he certainly, what I know about Juwan Sider and the way he uses backs, he's more maybe calculating on when those guys are out of the game. Like you could see maybe Kedron Young in a short yardage situation in the second quarter of a game. And then he has Jeremiah Love fresh for those kind of situations in the third and the fourth quarter. But, you know, I wouldn't put a limit on what he could do. I think Aeneas Williams surprised us last year beyond what any of us thought his involvement would be. I think where I'm curious, Tyler, from your standpoint, and I know that you're no relation to Nolan, but of those two other backs, Payne and James, who would you think has the better chance to see more meaningful reps now that Young's out of the picture?
I would think Payne. I think his experience does matter. I think he was someone who had some success as a short yardage back. Not that there's a huge necessarily need for that, as you mentioned with Love's ability. And I think Aeneas Williams might be able to do some of that too, even though you think of him as more of a third down option. I think he's someone that seemingly didn't get tackled at first contact much last year. I do think Nolan James is talented and has some wiggle to his game and some physicality to it. He's maybe not as physically mature as someone like Jabron Payne. Payne is someone who I think is intriguing to me to see, like, okay, what can he get back to? How much did his knee injury limit what he has been? He's someone that dealt with a lot of injuries in high school. I believe most of those were ankle injuries. And we need to see what he can get back to. I know Dylan McCullough was certainly a big reason why Jabron Payne came to Notre Dame, and a big reason why Payne was able to carve out a role in McCullough's sort of game planning with so many different. He wanted to have niches for guys and had all these different roles, and Payne was able to pick up some of those. I'm curious to see if Sider will have a similar sort of similar opportunities for guys that are third and fourth on the depth chart as McCullough did. I'm a little bit hesitant to see if he will, based on sort of the results when he was at Penn State, and being very top heavy with his running backs. But I think Payne is certainly capable of providing something for Notre Dame if they need him to. Let's move over to Bauman. Eric, how big of a loss do you think he is to Notre Dame's tight end group?
From a number standpoint, it's a little bit concerning because now you're down to 4 healthy scholarship tight ends until Cooper Flanagan is back. We don't have a real firm timetable for him. Marcus Freeman has said he'll be back during the season, but given that was an Achilles injury and it was in January, that could certainly be an extended timeline. So you may be at 4 tight ends. And there's certainly players you can move from other positions. You have a pretty good group of walk-ons. But I think Kevin Bauman was a guy that you could count on to give you some quality reps, not certainly a dynamic, explosive player with as many leg injuries as he had, but certainly a guy that you love to have on the field, another veteran presence for a young quarterback to tap into, a calming presence. And what a great story it was, him coming back. And he'll always be kind of somebody that I'm curious 10 years down the road what his life is like and how this Notre Dame experience has impacted it. How about you? What do you feel about Kevin Bauman's absence?
Yeah, I put Kevin Garber's comment on there because I thought it was important. That I think a lot of times fans get painted in a corner, like when bad things happen, they just get mad at people. But I think like Kevin Bauman deserves a lot of respect for what he did in putting his body through so much and continuing to try to fight back through injuries during his time at Notre Dame. Um, I think I've mentioned it on a show previously that he started to look like someone on the practice field that I thought could be a contributor. I sort of had tempered expectations given his injury history, but it was like, you know what? I think Kevin Bauman looks like someone now that can contribute for Notre Dame this season, and giving the numbers there, I thought that he would be needed. We'll see how Notre Dame is able to absorb that. There's just so few scholarship guys behind Eli Raridon. You're looking at 3 right now that are healthy behind Eli Raridon, with Ty Washington, Jack Larsen, and James Flanagan. And so 4 tight ends is probably enough to get you through a season, but it's certainly.
But one's a transfer that left on bad terms, one's a true freshman, and one's a redshirt freshman that didn't play a lot.
Yeah, so the margin for error there is very, very thin. So Mike Denbrock will be tested with how he uses his tight ends. I think it'll be curious to see if this impacts how he chooses to use tight ends in the offense. I would imagine there's going to be less 12 personnel usage than a year ago. Do we even see some 20 personnel when we get 2 backs and no tight ends? I think there's a possibility that could happen this coming season.
Well, it feels to me like James Flanagan is the best option as another traditional tight end. You know, what we've seen of Ty Washington and what I know of him from when he was at Arkansas, I mean, he's got a really interesting skill set, but it's very opposite of Eli Raridon. And then Jack Larsen, I was impressed with him in the spring. I mean, he was further along as a pass catcher, but again, I don't know about the physicality part. That's the one thing you know about Cooper Flanagan when he's healthy. That dude is physical. So that's where I'm really curious about the tight ends.
Yeah, and with Bowman not making it to the season, how valuable do you think it was just what he did in terms of being there in the spring with the program, and continuing to provide a veteran presence with the tight ends moving forward?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that at Sunday's practice, and the fact that he's going to be in all the meetings and he's going to start coming to the practices and he wants to be very involved. I think that's huge because the guys in the room really look up to him, and there's a lot of knowledge. I mean, his knee may be not any use for football anymore, but his knowledge base is super helpful, and just a classy guy that knows the program and calming influence. I think Kevin Bauman is going to be really valuable.
Yeah, it's just the wear and tear he helped keep off of some of the other tight ends in the spring is incredible, because you got to remember Ty Washington wasn't there, and so they were really thin in the spring at tight end, with Raridon, Bauman, and Larsen as the scholarship guys there. There was a question that came in here from Irish fan: who are the walk-on tight ends? Might we see some Hank Garrity this season? Yeah, so there's 2 walk-on tight ends: Justin Fisher, who's from Mishawaka, and then Henry Garrity, who's the son of Pat Garrity. So Notre Dame does have some walk-ons at the position, and Notre Dame's walk-on tight ends are probably a little bit better than your average walk-on tight ends because of how good that position is on Notre Dame's roster. But I don't think Notre Dame wants to have to rely on them. Obviously, Davis Sherwood is someone who was a walk-on at some point during his Notre Dame career and became a scholarship tight end for the Irish.
Well, let me ask you this then. We had talked about, one of the first things I did the defensive practice report. You did the offensive practice report for blueandgold.com on Sunday. The first thing I'm looking at is 25 over with the tight ends, Preston Zinner, because he was a pretty good tight end in high school. He's, from a height standpoint, undersized. I mean, he's 240. He could probably play kind of an H-back role, kind of a Davis Sherwood role if they needed another body. Is there anybody you can think of on the roster where Notre Dame could be creative at some points, like an Owen Strebig or even Will Black, in kind of that jumbo look like they used with Joe Alt at the beginning of 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could do something with like Will Black there as a extra sort of blocking tight end. I mean, in theory, you could probably throw any number of offensive tackles out there. I mean, they should be able to block. Like that's the
Right.
but in terms of catching passes, Will Black did have like a long touchdown reception in his senior year of high school. But he would probably be the leading candidate there. I mean, certainly Gerby Lambert, as he sort of seems to be your third tackle right now, and maybe even
Pat
your third
Coogan's
guard.
got his hand raised, but he's down at Indiana,
Yeah,
the center.
so they could do stuff there. I'm not sure if there's guys beyond Preston Zinter that would make sense to play tight end, especially on such short notice, right? Because
Correct. On such short notice. I mean, Zinter, you could see because it would give you some help maybe down the road in the season if you had another injury,
right?
Because he's not going to play at Viper this year. Do you think? I mean, it does, especially.
I mean,
with
I don't think so unless there's injury issues there. I mean, I think he could develop into an interesting player there, but there's just so many bodies ahead of him that I don't know that he'll be needed
right
there. But yeah, maybe in terms of a long term, in terms of the season, to get because he's spent his whole time at Notre Dame on defense, he'd have a lot of catching up to do. But even someone like who's no longer with the team that was a receiver, Jaden Thomas, he's been used in sort of blocking.
I don't remember what TV announcer thought he was a tight end, was calling him a tight end in a game.
Yeah, I think in my mind that was the game in Las Vegas. So I think that would have been Jack Collinsworth on the call there, but I could be incorrect there. Okay. I don't know that there's another receiver that would make sense that you would move over. Notre Dame doesn't have a ton of like big receivers that would be able that you want to take out of the room to become a tight end. So I think they'll probably have to do with the numbers that they have, and I'm not sure that we'll see a lot of creativity there, but something that Notre Dame will have to continue to address on its roster moving forward. Certainly having two tight ends in this incoming class. And we talked about a lot earlier in the summer that Notre Dame was open to taking three. If Evan Jacobson wanted in, they would still take him. He ended up committing to Texas A&M, but Preston Frizzell and Ian Primer will be the two tight ends in this class. And maybe Notre Dame circles back and decides to try to get a third, but I don't think that will necessarily be the case in this class. All right. Speaking of sort of putting Notre Dame in a bad spot with the depth, those probably won't be the last two injuries to Notre Dame's contributing roster, because this is college football. Notre Dame has done a good job building its depth throughout the roster, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on which position group can least afford an injury moving forward?
So I'm going to answer this generically because there's certain players at certain positions where it changes the scope of the question. But let's say it's maybe a backup. I mean, tight end, obviously.
Yeah.
Offensive guard for me would be one. At this point, you would probably have a freshman or a redshirt freshman playing offensive guard. And I would say quarterback, and you'd say, well, wait a second, CJ Carr, Kenny Mincchi, but then you're really a snap away from having a true freshman, Blake Hebert or Tyler Buckner, whose last pass he's thrown as a quarterback was at Alabama a couple of years ago, and was practicing at wide receiver and scout team triple option quarterback last year. So those would be the three that jump out at me. How about you?
Yeah, I think those all track. I'd hate to lose a defensive tackle because
it just depends which one.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of thought about like guys that are in the rotation. Like, we're not talking about guys that aren't playing, and I don't want to single out a specific guy because then it feels like you're putting a jinx on a guy. But I just want to see
top of the rotation guys. Yeah, those four that play a lot.
Right.
The interior defensive line, I do think that would be really testing that depth. You have a lot of numbers there and a lot of maybes there too.
Yeah, and Outbound chimed in kicker and punter. That's probably pretty fair. Although
Eric Schmidt is a good insurance policy. I mean, I think he's a good looking kicker and punter.
Yeah. So obviously you don't want to have injury issues there.
And
but...
Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman.
And so if you didn't understand the intro, Marcus Freeman at practice on Sunday was punting volleyballs so that they could practice punt block drills. He was volunteering to help. So that was interesting.
It didn't look like he had a great form, but I think he was also trying not to get hurt at the same time. So can't blame him for that. All right, let's update the quarterback competition, Eric. We're inside 3 weeks until Notre Dame season opener, and the quarterback competition between Kenny Mincchy and CJ Carr continues. From your perspective, have we learned anything notable about the competition in the last week since we last did Football Never Sleeps?
I think we learn more from whispers and talking to people behind the scenes than what we're actually seeing in practice, because we are not seeing competitive periods. We are seeing some drills and so forth, but they're not showing us a lot. I don't like to overextend what I see in practice and say, wow, that guy, with the hamstring stretches, he looked really spry. That means he's going to be the number one quarterback. I don't like to do that, but just I felt like we got more information when we talked to the two players. And to me, Kenny Mincchy I've never seen him that confident. I always thought he was a really smart guy. I thought he was very athletic, and I thought he was really intriguing. I thought, man, if he can kind of put this all together, but in my mind, I still think CJ Carr will win this. I still think he's the guy with a higher ceiling, but I think Kenny Mincchy being in this is a very real thing. How about you?
Yeah, to me, the most concrete thing is that it's a real competition. It's not over. And that's where things stand. I don't know that we know a lot more in terms of who's more likely to win. I don't know that has been at least made clear to me. And I don't think I'm alone in that train of thought. So I think there was a perception that based on how we felt confident that CJ Carr was probably going to win the job, that maybe this was more a pretend competition, that they were saying it was a competition just to
which
make
Notre Dame has had before.
Sure.
Yeah, the Sam Hartman, Tyler Buckner felt kind of pretend, at least at the end.
Yeah, but it's just so much different when the guys aren't experienced, right? Like Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard, like they didn't come to Notre Dame to be backups. Like, yes, there's a world where something goes wrong and somehow the other guy passes them up, but the likelihood of those things happening weren't very high. That wasn't the way that this was being handled going into this preseason, and these two guys are battling it out, and we'll find out how soon they feel like they're ready to make that decision. Do you think we have any indication that the answer is becoming more clear to the coaching staff?
I mean, I do think that they have a good idea, because I still think their calculus throws in high ceiling. When you think about last year, Steve Angeli had this high floor, and the bet, even with Riley Leonard getting injured in the spring and being behind and playing catch up, was that it was a race against time that Riley Leonard could win, that he could turn into the quarterback that could win playoff games for them. And that bet ended up turning out. I think where Kenny Mincchy's made it interesting is maybe he's got a higher ceiling than they thought, but I still think they believe CJ Carr has the higher ceiling. Now, how does that play into the present? That's going to be interesting, but I would be surprised if we do not know by Sunday. When Marcus Freeman speaks to us on Sunday, I believe it's going to be after a scrimmage. I would think that's when, kind of the end of the window of when an announcement would come, but we've seen stranger things before.
Yeah, and you must have read Scott Fegan's mind or saw his comment in the chat. He asked if Marcus Freeman will make his decision on the starting quarterback by Sunday. He said, well, he doesn't have to announce it. I'm curious if he, Denbrock, and Gino will feel strongly about the starter.
I guess, and I believe we're talking to coordinators that day too. So
yeah, the only thing that I would push back on is that I don't think they're going to because they're talking to us that day. It's not the reason why they will make the decision. Like the timing of it is like they're shifting into Texas or Miami prep, and they need to sort of have that decision made, or would like to have that decision made. That was sort of how it was expressed by Gino Guidugli. I think they'll take it as far as they need to. And I suppose there is a world where they're not quite sure yet. I don't think that's a good thing for Notre Dame if they don't have clarity on that by then. And then at that point, there's a chance that Notre Dame maybe doesn't reveal it at all. Is there a world that you think that Notre Dame could go into the Miami game without having a clearly defined starter?
I don't think that's Marcus Freeman's thing. I think Brian Kelly would do that. And I know Charlie Weiss would do that. But I think they'll know. And yeah, I'm not saying that. I think, Marcus is like, hey, we got a press conference. These people will have questions. We better tell them today. I just think that the timing is going to sync up with it being the end of training camp and having a scrimmage and having a pretty clear idea. But yeah, I mean, he's under no obligation. If he's like, I need a little bit more time and we don't have any press conferences the next week, they can always have a really cool video on social media and do it that way. And they may do that before Sunday. So, but I think it's interesting that it became a real competition. And again, that presses the point. If it's that close, does that number 2 quarterback have a package of plays, especially if Carr is the starter and Mincchi is the number 2? Is there validity to looking at that or considering that? I mean, yeah, you could say, let's try that and do it in practice and say, no, that's not working. But I think it's a concept that's worth talking about. And certainly they're not going to be real. If they're really considering it, they're not going to say, yeah, that's what we're thinking about at Miami and tell them.
I wanted to throw in this follow-up from Scott. I'm curious how long Marcus Freeman will play the starter against Miami. If CJ or Kenny are struggling, will he pull him after a certain number of plays?
Given how Marcus Freeman handled Riley Leonard in the Northern Illinois game, I do not think he would pull the starter. It would have to be a disastrous kind of Brandon Wimbush performance down at Miami in 2017 to maybe consider that. I think they want to say, we made a decision. We've invested all this time in getting to know these guys. We feel like we're going to make the right decision. We don't want that quarterback to be looking over his shoulder every time he throws an incomplete pass. So I don't think that they're going to, whoever's the starter is going to have a short leash.
Yeah, I think it would, like, if that were to happen, it would have to be like Miami had pulled out to a big lead and it's like, man, this is going to be a hard comeback no matter what. So let's get the other guy in there. And then you can sort of spin. It's like, yeah, well, we actually have faith in whoever the starter was, but we just felt like we needed to change things up because it had gotten to such a lopsided standpoint. I'm curious to see, like, yes, that they stuck with Leonard in a hairy situation against Northern Illinois, but was that because there was more trust in Leonard because of his past? And neither of these quarterbacks have that at the college level. I tend to agree with you, Eric, that I don't think that Marcus Freeman or Mike Denbrock or Gino Guidugli would be like pounding to get a new quarterback in there sooner than most people would expect. I think that they'll want to stand behind whoever they decide to play, unless the decision is to split series or something like that, which I don't know that that's something we're anticipating at this point.
Yeah, but I would make the point, they know these two guys too. They know them probably better than Riley Leonard. Than Mike Denbrock at least knew Riley Leonard. I mean, he was at LSU when they started looking in the portal and so forth. So, those guys have been in the system, and after having them this long, now again, CJ missed a big chunk of last year during the season practices because of the elbow injury, but I think they know those guys.
All right, I'm going to take a quick break to give us another word from our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we carry all the gear you need from the top brands, all at prices you love. And now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. We offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. Want to save even more every day? Open and use an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card to get 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors and have fun out there. All right, Eric. Folks, if you want some
I
more
love
questions,
that concept of the assembly of the grills. I've
Yeah,
done both. I've had somebody put it together and I've done it myself. And
Yeah.
man, it was spread out in my living room floor for a couple of days. So I will take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm in need of a new grill, so maybe I should line one up. So let's move on, Eric, to some offensive line developments out of Notre Dame, folks. I think our question queue is pretty clean, so if you have some questions, feel free to send them in. But we have plenty of things we can carry the conversation with prepared. We had a chance to speak to offensive line coach Joe Rudolph and defensive line coach Al Washington and several of their players last week. Let's start, Eric, on the offensive line. Do you think the right guard position battle is completely settled?
I don't, but I think there's a clear leader. I think Sullivan Absher was a really good option to plug in there, and I think he's practiced well, and Joe Rudolph seemed really pleased with how he's doing. But I also know that Joe Rudolph feels like this team thrives when there's competition, and he always wants competition going on. And last year he showed that the competition doesn't stop halfway through training camp. And so I think there's some good young challengers. I think there are, some young players, some of them tackles that are playing guard. And then you have Chris Tarrick, who's a natural guard. I think those guys will all challenge Sullivan Absher. But if I had to bet a Dump Davy sticker, I would bet that Sullivan Absher wins that.
Yeah, I think there's still time, and it would probably need to happen this week for someone like Gerby Lambert to surge ahead of Sullivan Absher, who missed a little time with an apparent injury. I think that's sort of like, that's a reminder, like, okay, we need to get someone else ready in case Sullivan Absher isn't ready to go and is our guy. I'm not sure it's Chris Tarrick or Peter Jones, and I believe Peter Jones missed a little bit of time at practice when we were there the other day. So, I mean, that's obviously, we've talked about it before, like, and we'll talk a little bit about what Joe Rudolph said about Will Black, the fact that he's taking some guard reps. That's notable, though it's been in.
So is Matty Augustine.
And Matty Augustine, those are deeper reserve freshmen that Notre Dame likes. And so we'll see how things progress. Do you think, as it stands today, let's say Sullivan Absher is the starting right guard, is Gerby Lambert then the next man in at both guard or tackle for Notre Dame?
I think he is in this moment, because, again, Joe Rudolph isn't who's my next best guard, it's who's my best five. And so I think Gerby Lambert is number 6. But I think Will Black is pushing at number 7. And the fact that he's getting so much work at guard right now, that might make that a more appealing situation if he were called upon. But I think Gerby Lambert is the number 6 guy right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I just think he sort of is in right now the role that Sullivan Absher was in the offseason, in terms of being sort of the next man up. And I think that Gerby Lambert
he's taken reps both in the spring and this fall at guard too. He's not just been solidly a tackle.
Right. Let's get to what Joe Rudolph said about freshman Will Black. I know we're talking to Rudolph. What did he say about Will Black working at guard?
Yeah, I said, what was the thinking in starting him out there? And he said, I think the only reason to start him out working at guard is because I thought it might be a spot where we could need him. He was really comfortable at tackle. So rather than move him back and forth, I put him at his uncomfortable spot. And I said, let me see if this kid could kind of grow into this year. Never minded me to start a guy that I thought would be a really good tackle at guard and then move him back out there, because I think early on, sometimes the less space gets you confident just to play. I think for him, sometimes the physicality for a guy that plays tackle to go to guard, you find out pretty early whether it's in him to do that. And it's in him to do that. He's done a really good job through this period of time. Matty Augustine's done a good job doing that. Both of these guys are playing at a high level and have the ability to grasp multiple positions, which is kind of shocking for young players. So a little bit of translation there too is, I think they are so high on Will Black, they want to find a path into the two deeps for him, whether it be tackle or guard. They want him ready at both, and that's what they're doing. And I think they're very impressed with him. And Augustine, to me, I think is kind of in the same sentence, but a little bit further back in the sentence. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think those are guys that had some expectations coming to Notre Dame as recruits, but it's not always the guy that the guys with the highest expectations or the highest recruiting rankings that sort of can hit the ground running. Obviously, when you talk about Will Black, he was a 5-star recruit according to On3 and Rivals, I believe. So that is good to hear that he's like, not only is he hitting the ground running, but he's someone that they're like, you know what, we can play him at guard if we need to. Matty Augustine is someone who was in here or was at Notre Dame in the spring. So was able to acclimate himself, and it sounds like he's really done well in doing so. And I think it does seem to me, like I mentioned earlier, like I'm not sure that Peter Jones and Chris Terek are the guys that Notre Dame has a ton of confidence in. Now, I don't know if it's my
Rudolph
perception.
Did Chris Terek that he thought he was coming along.
That's good.
He mentioned 4 guys beyond the guys that are in the starting 5, and Terek was one of those. And Lambert and the 2 freshmen were the other ones.
Yeah, and so like I just feel like there's a little bit of a gap in terms of like you got these freshmen, and you got the guys that are competing to start, and then it's like I'm not sure like the pecking order in terms of all those other guys, and there are plenty of other guys there. It's just not clear to me like how realistic those, like is Styles Prescott someone who Notre Dame would play if it had to, and in what situation would Notre Dame get into to do that. It's good to hear that there is some positive reviews for Chris Terek, because he was also, I think, taking what was essentially third string reps in practice on Sunday when they were doing 3 versus 3s. It was even basically a defensive line so deep, you're basically looking at 4s because they have so many defensive linemen. And
he had to come back from some injuries too. He had a couple of
he had not a great year in terms of on the health front, and so he had a lot of work to do to get back and competing. So
Peter Jones, man, if you see him walking around campus, you say that guy's a starter. Him and Lambert, those are the 2 guys that they're walking around campus, you say those are 2 starters, and you would be wrong at this point.
Is there anything else on the offensive line we haven't covered you wanted to highlight, Eric?
I think the thing that I'm curious about, and I do want to talk about this, because I think one of the things that's really cool with Joe Rudolph is how much he taps into the Joe Moore, Harry Hiestand lineage. The very first practice that they had, he's showing Joe Moore talking to, film of Joe Moore talking to his team, the Joe Moore creed, I am because of us, and some of the Harry Hiestand things too, and say this is still applicable to us. And the fact that, he has connections to both. They're all 3 from Pennsylvania. Joe Moore used to come to Wisconsin's practices at times and heckle Joe Rudolph as a player, and then take him aside after practice and give him some tips. Harry Hiestand, when he was at Cincinnati a million years ago, was in Joe Rudolph's parents' living room trying to recruit Joe Rudolph. So there's a tremendous amount of respect, and I think it's really smart that Joe Rudolph has incorporated that because it raises the standard for these guys. I think that's really good stuff.
Yeah, and with the endowment of coaching staff positions, Joe Rudolph is officially the Joe Moore offensive line coach at Notre Dame. That one maybe holds a little bit more weight than some of the others do in terms of the endowment, given Joe Moore's track record as a coach. Those are typically maybe not necessarily former coaches, but folks who have done a lot in terms of donating money or having impact on people in different ways, but certainly impactful as well. But being the Joe Moore offensive line coach, you better make sure that folks know what Joe Moore is all about. And it seems like in everything that we observe, I guess for me, I didn't know Joe Moore personally to understand what he was as an offensive line coach, and seeing that sort of in Joe Rudolph as well.
The other thing that surprised me a little bit in talking to Joe, because I spent my whole time with him during that session, was how high he is on Anthony Knapp. Because I think from the outside looking in, we're like, Anthony Knapp, he's kind of the weakest link, and he's not in Joe Rudolph's mind. And he's come a long way since last year, fundamentally very sound. But he said, in terms of strength and power and those kind of things, he said he's at the top of the tackle list. When you think about some of the physical specimen that are in camp, including Gerby Lambert, you're like, okay, that's a pretty good little tidbit.
All right, let's hop into some questions. We have a lot of quarterback questions, as you can imagine. This one's related to quarterbacks, but more about the running backs. Good evening from Terry Howie. Do you foresee the Irish opening up against Miami with more two-back sets to help the quarterback, whomever that will be?
I know this, Terry, that Notre Dame's fan base, if they were calling plays, there would be two-back sets 80% of the time. I know that people love that, and I can understand why you ask the question and why you would like that. I don't know that we're going to see it ever as a steady diet, but I think as a tweak here and there, or a wrinkle here and there, I think it makes sense because of the receiving skills of the running backs. I mean, you can do a lot out of that if Miami has, personnel on the field where there's a bad matchup and they're anticipating a run with the two running backs in the game, to split either one or both of those running backs out as receivers would be really interesting to see the mismatches there. But I don't think it'll be a staple, but I do think we'll see it more than we saw it last year.
Yeah, I do think it will be a part of the offense, and probably from the start at Miami. Gauging how much, I'm not certain of. I think it would require different wrinkles in the running game plan, and than we've seen before. I think Notre Dame relied a lot on its tight ends to being able to do things, and even some of its receivers to providing key blocks that help spring Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price loose for long gains. How do you do that with a second running back on the field? What's the way to do that? I'm curious to see what that looks like. We haven't necessarily seen a lot of it in like scrimmage settings, because we just haven't seen a lot of scrimmage settings, but we have seen a lot of it
because we haven't been peeking through the fence.
We've seen a lot of it through different drills and stuff like that.
The one thing that I would predict, if Ty Washington is the player that Mike Denbrock thinks he is, he's going to be doing some of those functions as a tight end. In the one practice we did see him, he would line up the furthest receiver out. Sometimes he'd line up in the slot. He'd go in motion a lot. You can do a lot with that in terms of having him be an H-back function. So he may fill some of those functions. I just haven't seen enough of practice to blab to Miami what they're doing.
TD4ND wants to know if you have any Dump Divine stickers.
I don't. I think I could probably make some, but I do not have that. I'll tell you what, I used to work with a guy named Joe Doyle, who was a long-time columnist at the South Bend Tribune, and he hated Dan Devine, so he may have left some to his children and grandchildren. I'll have to check with them.
More quarterback conversation. Bob Alvey said, didn't they open the quarterback position after Northern Illinois, but before the Purdue game last year?
Not a bit. I remember asking the question about it, and I remember asking Marcus about Riley Leonard getting booed, and he was adamant about it. And you hear interviews with Riley Leonard when he was getting ready to go in the NFL, and he tells the backstory about how much he wondered if his job was in doubt and how much Marcus was in his corner adamantly. So no, it was not opened up. That maybe it was on somebody's message board that lives in their mom's basement.
Mike McNeil says, why would you let Miami know who is the starting quarterback 2 weeks out when you don't have to?
I just don't think Marcus sees that as a great competitive advantage. And I think he also thinks that it would be hard to keep it quiet and would rather just do it. And you can surprise Miami in other ways. So, I mean, I guess Miami could play that game too and say, well, we don't know if Carson Beck is our starter. It'd be kind of hard to convince people, but they could certainly pull that off or try to pull it off. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know when that's worked well as far as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I don't remember if he started or not, but Marcel Reed against LSU really made that look bad last year. And I don't think that
he did not start. He did not start that game.
He didn't start that game, but
yeah, he came in.
They were ill prepared for him when he did come in. So
they were ill prepared. And I don't know that Elko went into that game thinking Marcel Reed was going to play. I think they just were looking to shake things up, and they certainly did.
So yeah, I mean, there's not enough film out there on either guy that I think Miami would like significantly change how it's going to play defense based on its knowledge of who would be the starter between the two.
4 plays each against Purdue.
So I'm not sure that keeping it a secret would give much of an advantage. I think whatever preparation they've been doing to this point would probably stay pretty similar based on the quarterbacks. Although, yes, we do know that Kenny Mincchi is probably more mobile and maybe more likely to try to get out of the pocket and run for some yardage than CJ Carr would be. Scott Fegan says, what worries you the most about the Miami game? The Heat, their offense, or defense? I don't think that's multiple choice. I think he's just suggesting things potentially.
I think what would be most concerning is that Miami appears to be a pretty complete team. They were the #1 team in scoring last year, and they were pretty good in their front seven, and they would get nicked sometimes against good quarterbacks in the back end. And then they went out and got some pretty good portal pickups in their defensive backfield. So I think it's hard to find a real area of weakness where you say, let's attack this. I think Notre Dame's where I feel good about Notre Dame competing with a team that's that complete, and they're number 10 for a reason, is I think Notre Dame will be able to get pass rush on Carson Beck. I think they will be able to do that. And I think that's going to be a big factor in this game. But I anticipate a lower scoring game. I think this is a game that would be like 24-17 or something like that is what I'm predicting for a team in Miami that was scoring in the 40s and 50s last year with regularity. But they have a different quarterback, and they didn't see anything like Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah, I think to me the worries start and end primarily with the uncertainty at quarterback and how is a first-time starter going to handle the environment of playing at Miami and everything that comes with that. Playing against a good defensive line that even against a good Notre Dame offensive line may be able to generate a good pass rush. That's where the worries start. A little concern maybe in terms of this being the first game in Chris Ash's defense. Like what is that? Is there a chance that there's some slip ups there for Notre Dame? And maybe not in a way that it's like Notre Dame's giving up 35 points or 42 points, but a couple of big plays that allow Miami to stay in the game and make it closer than you want it to be. And if it's a low scoring game, like Eric mentioned that he believes it will be, a couple plays here or there could make a difference. in terms of keeping it tight and allowing Miami to have a chance to win the game. So those would probably be the concerns. The Heat, I mean, it's real. I don't think we can't completely downplay that. I think Notre Dame is going to do everything within its power to prepare for that. And I think they'll be okay in terms of handling that.
And it's been pretty hot and humid here. I mean,
it has. It hasn't been pleasant. It has not been pleasant as of late around here. So it's not quite the same, but Notre Dame is doing a good job of preparing for that.
I want to circle back to why would you tell the quarterback? I'll tell you where I think Notre Dame is smart playing it close to the vest. Chris Ash doesn't give you a whole lot in terms of specifics in interviews about what the defense is going to look like. And I do think that's a tactical advantage. He hasn't been a coordinator in college for 5 years. And you know, he's like, yeah, we're going to do the Notre Dame defense and stuff. I know that there's going to be tweaks and there are going to be differences, but I do think, you know, being kind of a blind date and Miami having to adjust to how Chris Ash's defense is different, I think is a tactical advantage. So I do think that one is smart to hold your cards close to the vest.
Yeah, I've tried to interview Chris Ash a number of times and get some details out of him. And there's just not a lot that he's willing to go to in terms of specifics.
He didn't even want to go into details when I asked him about detasseling corn as a college student. Yeah. Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, he was not interested in you trying to bring back some memories of his younger days. He wanted to push that to the side as well. Rajon says, is there any vibe on who the team is hoping to win the quarterback derby?
I'm not getting that. I'm not getting a vibe out of that. I think Kenny Mincchi has raised his profile in terms of his team also having confidence in him. I think they probably went into camp thinking CJ might be the guy that was going to win it, but they were open to Kenny winning it. And I just think the way he carries himself, I mean, and just watching him being interviewed, and again, you know, winning the press conference doesn't mean anything, but the way a guy carries himself and his confidence, and he just had this thing about him where I go, I like that guy. I still think CJ will win it, but I think his teammates see that too, to see the confidence and see the performances getting better and see that he's, you know, if CJ won the job and there was an injury, that they'd have confidence that Kenny could come in and win games for them. This is a team that wants to get back to the national championship game. And I think they feel like there's two guys that could probably do that for them.
Yeah, Outbound mentioned, have you guys heard about Jeremiah Love using Kenny Mincchi as his quarterback in NCAA, the video game? And I did notice that when he was posting stories about playing the game. I don't know if Jeremiah Love got asked about that. So I know, like, for those who are unfamiliar with playing the NCAA video game, it typically helps to have a mobile quarterback. You can be very hard to defend when playing the game with that, and Kenny Mincchi, I think, is probably more mobile. I have not played the game, so I can't speak to what their attributes are in terms of what EA Sports is assigning them, but I think there's some to that. But yeah, I don't think there's a clear favorite. I think the way this competition has like unfolded in terms of, listen, these guys are going out there every day and competing for it. It's not like it's been given to either of them. So I think that alone helps in terms of they will be supported because both were given a fair shot. And even if maybe if you were someone on the team who thought Kenny Mincchi should be the starter or CJ Carr is the starter and the opposite happens, I think you'll respect that they earned it through this preseason.
And I think they've been fairly supportive of each other too. When it was the Zaire Kaiser thing, it was divisive. Malik didn't want to have anything to do with sharing anything. And Malik, I love Malik, and he's been on our podcast before. But if Joe Montana were on the same roster as Malik, Malik would still think he was the better quarterback.
Terry Howie said, Hard Rock will be crazy loud, and I'm a little concerned about our Aussie punter handling the pressure. Am I just paranoid, or is it a real concern considering how inconsistent he was last year?
I think James needed to get used to all kinds of things having to do with college punting, even though that he trained in Australia to be a college punter. And not all of it was like pressure or heat or this and that. Sometimes it was punting in the first quarter and then not again until the fourth quarter. I mean, this is a guy that's used to playing Australian rules football or whatever it's called. And, being very active and so forth. And he said that was, I mean, there was all kinds of things, time zones, the water swirling down the toilet the opposite way. I mean, they're not having Vegemite sandwiches. I think he's had a year to adjust to all that. And he does like Vegemite sandwiches. I did ask him that. That's a reference from a song by the Men Down Under. What was their group name? Land Down Under. Men at Work. Those are the guys from Australia. Anyways.
I've heard the song, but I wouldn't have been able to name that. So I
Land Down Under, Vegemite sandwich.
Providing much help there. I mean, he needs to be better, more consistent. To me, I don't think it's a pressure thing. It's just a matter of learning how to do things at this level consistently, and it's not an easy thing to do. That was his first year ever doing it in the sport, so I would expect there to be improvement there. He doesn't seem to be someone, from my perspective, that gets intimidated by a situation. So I don't think that would be the reason why he could potentially struggle. Jeff Stevens, is there one 5-star-ish 2026 recruit that was seriously considering Notre Dame but went elsewhere and would have moved the needle for the class?
That's a Tyler question.
I don't have an answer prepared for this. Were
there any 5-star wide receivers that would have moved the needle that they were really in on? Because they did have a really good wide receiver class.
My biggest problem is I don't know where people are ranked, so I need to figure out that. Like, that's the hard part in my head. Like, for instance, the Mosley kid, is it Trent Mosley? Is the latest rendition of the Mosley family.
Yeah.
He committed to USC. That was someone that Notre Dame felt good with. I'm not sure what his ranking is. I'm pulling it up right now, but Rivals actually has him
almost as Finley is ranked ahead of him, or at least in the old Rivals rankings.
Yeah, well, in the current Rivals rankings, he's only a 3-star. So
Finley is?
No, Mosley. Sorry,
Mosley. Okay.
So I would need to come up with the list of the highest ranked recruits currently that Notre Dame was in on before I could answer that question better. So Jeff, if you want to bring that question over to the message board over on the loose emoji board, I'll see if I can track down a better answer for you there. Bob Alvey said Marcus Freeman said he wanted to create pressure on the quarterback during the QB competition. Which quarterback is feeling the most pressure? Is it by design?
Well, he wanted to create pressure with like pass rush and difficult coverages and disguise coverages and things like that. But I think that in turn creates pressure in being a quarterback race. They wanted to see if a player made a mistake, threw an interception. Does he throw another interception right away because he's still thinking about the first one, or is he able to recover from that and get back into his lane and play well? I think that's what he meant by creating pressure. Chaos, I think, was the word that Mike Denbrock might have used. Chaos is what they wanted to create to see how these guys would respond to really difficult situations. And I think that helps create some separation. Who handles that well?
EJ Ricky says, is it surprising that Rocco Spindler was named preseason All Big Ten? Pendleton getting lots of hype at Tennessee too. And I just pulled up the Big Ten announces 2025 football preseason honors. I don't see Rocco Spindler.
I saw Spindler. I think I've seen Pat Coogan's name on some lists for things in terms of draft prospects and maybe some kind of second team or third team Big Ten honors.
Yeah,
but I would be surprised.
Obviously, there's plenty of different outlets that do different preseason list. So I mean, someone could have put him on there. The official Big Ten one that I pulled up, at least I think that I pulled up here, does not have Rocco Spindler on it. But I mean, he's the guy who started at Notre Dame, so there should be plenty of familiarity with him and expectations for him to contribute. So I mean, I wouldn't be stunned if he received some preseason hype.
Tyler will probably remember this. There was a year, and we had Tommy Kramer on our podcast, so we kind of kidded him about this. But one year, he was preseason All-American. He was projected as a first-round draft choice, and he was kind of the guy that just kind of eked in as the fifth starter on the offensive line. But what happens with a lot of these preseason things is because there's not stats other than Pro Football Focus grades, there's a lot of copycatting going on, and people look back, well, gosh, he was a 5-star recruit, and he's a senior now. He must be really good. And so that's kind of how that weird ball gets rolling.
Yeah, the only thing that, to me, the all-time
Rocco was highly recruited.
Yeah, the all-time worst of like draft mocks was Corey Robinson being a first-round draft projection when that was not something that was happening, and so he was closer to retiring from football, which was partially due to health, than he was to being a first-round eventual draft pick.
But he is a first-round draft pick as a person. He's a superhuman being.
Corey Robinson's a great person. Rajon and then EJ Ricky chimed in saying that Rocco Spindler was named that by Pro Football Focus. So I don't know
which seems odd because I don't remember his stats being way up there. I think he had a decent year, but it wasn't off the charts good from Pro Football Focus. But when you think about Pendleton and Coogan, and I mean, you could make an argument, is Coogan better than Craig? I mean, they certainly felt like Craig was the better player, but in terms of those guards, if Jagaza were healthy, would Rocco beat out either Schrouth or Charles Jagaza? And the answer is no, nor would Pendleton. But I think those guys are really good players.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You can't keep that many offensive linemen that want to play on a team, especially in a day and age where you can get paid other places to play and be a starter. So I think it's difficult. We're running a little bit long here, Eric. I wanted to maybe speed through some stuff here on the defensive line and at receiver. How deep do you think Notre Dame's defensive line group is, and how many defensive ends and defensive tackles do you think will realistically play?
I think at defensive end, there's definitely two deep, and you can make a case for a third deep at both defensive ends. One would be Logan Thomas, and then the other side would be Christopher Burgess Jr. I was curious whether Burgess would be inside already, but he was working at defensive end the other day. I think they have a lot more numbers to work with in the interior. Do they have the quality? I mean, that interior rotation, you figure there's going to be a lot of ball play by Dawson, Heinisch, Anye, and Rubio, and then it's a matter of who's behind them. Is it Sevillano? Is it Mukum? Is it Hughes? There's some really good options there too. I think he'll go 3 deep at most positions in most games.
Yeah, I'm curious, like who those like the third levels are, like if they get that far. Obviously, when Botello returns, like how does that look? Do you have more old school Vipers than you have field defensive ends that you feel confident in playing, and how well do those guys play on both sides of the field? That'll be an interesting development. I think, to me, the defensive tackle line is 4 that you feel the most confident in. I think I'm curious if Armel Mukum has become sort of that 5th guy. Could it be Sean Sevillano? Could it be Elijah Hughes? I think there's options there. I'm curious to see how deep that depth is in terms of what they're able to tap into this coming season.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're not going to show this to us, but there's a possibility you have a package where either Kingston Viliamu-Asa or Jalen Sneed is lined up as a defensive end and you kick somebody inside like
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young would be perfect.
Moving to receiver real quick. Notre Dame always seemingly needs to improve at wide receiver in recent years. And I would say that potential progress for the group has been overhyped going into the season upon looking at it in retrospect. Does it feel more real this time to you? And if so, why?
I think it feels more real. I think some of it is my confidence in the direction that Mike Denbrock is nudging the offense. I think Malachi Fields and Will Pauling, I think, are incredible additions. And then you think about some of the players that were existing on the roster and some of the jumps that we've seen from Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams in camp, and the Elijah Burris is looking good. I do think it's more real. I mean, Mitchell was a guy last year that had really good stats at a group of 5 school and then comes up to Notre Dame and just never made that leap. I mean, he had some catches and here and there, but he was never the impact guy that I think they hoped he would be. And I think Notre Dame has those kind of impact transfers this time.
Yeah, that's the way I'm leaning as well. The consistency that Fields has had in his career. Pauling hasn't been as consistent, but the potential seems to be there, and everything you hear about him as a worker leads you to believe that he's going to do everything he can to make an impact for Notre Dame. I think it's fair to be hopeful that Greathouse and Faison continue to make strides forward, and there's some young guys that are pushing behind them that I think could make an impact. Is there a receiver that has changed your perception of them so far in camp?
I would say Cam Williams has, and maybe it's because I went in kind of predicting that he might be the guy that surprised. And to me, I mean, physically, he looks really good. He's looks stronger and more athletic. I've seen him pop up catching passes. Now, again, we only saw competitive periods in shorts and shells the first day and so forth, but in drills, he looks like a better player, the kind of player that I kind of thought he would turn into. He's still got a ways to go, but that's the guy that I'm kind of following. The rest of them are pretty much what I thought they would be, for better or for worse. How about you?
I'm starting to see it with Logan Saldate a little bit more. It's starting to match with sort of the things that we've been hearing. I feel like I've seen it a little bit more on the field. And I've been more impressed with Jerome Bettis Jr. than I anticipated as a freshman. A long way to go for him in terms of making an impact on the field, but I've liked some of the things I've seen from him this preseason. All right, I'll just do a quick little spiel on Elijah Golden since we're going extra long here. Notre Dame's latest commitment. He's a 3 technique defensive tackle, though I think he could potentially grow into a nose tackle. Someone that Notre Dame wants to pair on the interior with Tiki Hola. And then they also have a pair of dynamic defensive ends in Rodney Dunham and even Ebenezer Iwatade. So a pretty complete class for Notre Dame on the defensive line. Rivals rates both Golden and Hola as 3-star recruits. Golden as number 59 defensive lineman on the interior and Hola at 94. I think I like Hola a little bit more than Golden personally. I think Golden maybe stands up, plays with too bit of a high pad level, and needs to improve on that. I think there's potential there. I actually compared him to Jerron Jones in my film study that I did the other day. So an intriguing prospect that has a lot of potential, but certainly has plenty to work on his game. So I wanted to give folks my quick thoughts there on Elijah Golden before we wrapped up and get out of here.
Well, Jerron Jones friended me on Facebook the other day. Elijah Golden has not.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can get that worked out. We appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Make sure you like the channels, like the videos, or subscribe to the channel, like the video. Head over to blueandgold.com for more coverage from us. And thanks to Academy Sports and Outdoors for presenting this edition of Football Never Sleeps. We'll be back next Monday, and we'll keep it rolling.